Hey there, my name is ARTFX and welcome back to my channel. It's time for another Vital tutorial. Today we're going to be making a pad sound, and I'm going to be showing you how I made this pad sound. So I started with Oscillator 1 using the dispersed pulse bend. 3 voices set to have a random phase so that every time we trigger a note, it places the voices of this oscillator in random positions across the stereo spectrum. There's a little bit of modulation happening on the wavetable position with random 1, which is this one right here. It's a random oscillator. Let's enable that. So what that's going to do, this random oscillator, set the stereo mode. It's going to move the wavetable position around, but different for the left and right channel. So what we get now is this. And you might be able to hear, and you can see it as well, we get 2 sort of like waveforms layered on top of each other. And you can hear it as well that the left and right channel are slightly different from each other. So I then decided to add the shepherd tone to the first warp mode here. Which really makes this sound almost out of tune, but that's kind of the sound that I want to go for. Then I have another random oscillator, which is this one. This one is not set to stereo, and this one is moving the shepherd tone warp knob around a little bit as well. So then we get this. So it's really inharmonic and really out of tune. So then on the second warp knob right here, I've got ring mod coming from Oscillator 2. So RM Oscillator 2. And let's turn Oscillator 2 on as well. 1 voice, so nothing happening there. Brought the phase all the way down and the random phase all the way down as well. So this one is restarting from this position every time we trigger a note. And we're also bringing the pitch down of this one to -7. So we're going down 7 semitones. So that is going to give us a really interesting sound. Now this is what it sounds like by itself. Let me reintroduce the level. So that's the sound by itself, but I brought the level all the way down because this is the one that's used to RM the first oscillator. So without the ring mod, this is what we get. And then with the ring mod, this is what we get. Now that sounds completely broken, I know, but bear with me, we're gonna fix it. Let's move on to oscillator number 3. This one is just a saw wave, basically. So it's just a saw wave set to 16 voices, so a lot of voices. This is just the initialized saw wave. A lot of voices, 20% detune, so we're getting good amount of detuning, good amount of unison. And I'm also bringing the phase all the way down, but keeping the random phase. So that is just gonna give a lot of stereo width to those 16 voices, making everything feel really wide. Now this one is an octave down, and I'm using the form and scale mode, which kind of just changes the shape of the saw wave. See, if I play around with this, we get slightly different shapes. Set it to roughly around there, so it's not an exact saw wave, but it sort of like bends up a little bit. It curves up a little bit along this shape here. Very subtle, not that important. By itself, it sounds like this. So this is the oscillator that gives us like the actual pitch of the patch. The other oscillators are mostly there to give some extra harmonics and to make it all sound a lot more interesting. So this one is FM though, by Oscillator 1. So Oscillator 1, remember, if I bring this one back now, is the one set to shepherd tone. So this one is out of tune, and it's doing a very tiny amount of FM on this third oscillator. So with that, it sounds like this. And that's very subtle. It just makes it sound a little bit dirtier. And then we had this one, which is RMing this oscillator, so now it sounds like this. Let's enable the sampler, and I have brought up the pitch to +12 and selected the river right here, the river noise. So that noise, I brought up the level a little bit, so we're just having a little bit of that level here, and there's also some modulation happening on the level itself, coming from envelope number 2. Now, envelope number 2 is this shape. It's a really slow envelope shape that opens up and then backs down a little bit with a long release as well. So that is controlling the level of the noise. So with that, we get some more noise on top now. Now it's all very distorted, and it might sound like, how is this even going to be a usable sound? Well, on Oscillator 2, there's also some movement happening with this stereo random oscillator. So the wavetable position of this one is also being controlled by this random oscillator. So let's go into the filters. Filter 1. Now filter 1 is actually pretty simple. It takes Oscillator 1, Oscillator 2 and Oscillator 3. Now Oscillator 2 shouldn't really be doing much because the volume is all the way down, so we can disable that one. We only need Oscillator 1 and 3 to run through the filter. It's a 12 dB per octave low pass filter. Good amount of resonance. I think the resonance is almost at the default position, to be quite honest. And we're using a little bit of key tracking on this as well, so that when we're playing higher notes, we are also opening up the filter a little bit more, making those upper harmonics come through when we play those higher notes. There might be some lower frequencies in that noise that we don't need. So I have another filter, and this one is accepting the sampler to run through it. It's set to a 24 dB per octave high pass filter, so it's cutting out all the low frequencies from this river noise, and that is basically it for this one. Yeah, that's basically it. See, so that makes it sound a lot cleaner. Now, we have modulation happening on this low-pass filter, so the first thing that we have is LFO number 1. Let's turn that one on. You can see it's a really subtle shape on a really slow speed, 32/1, so that's really slow. And what this is doing is it's basically just moving this cutoff position up and down. Now normally, this would be set to trigger, and what that is going to do is every time we play a note, it re-triggers the LFO shape. So this LFO would restart every time one of these notes is re-triggered. So instead of having this on the trigger mode, I set it to the sync mode, which basically means it doesn't re-trigger when we hit a new note, but it is synced to the actual BPM of the track. And we can see it as well. It's opening up right here. And it's also changing depending on what pitch we are playing. If we go up to higher pitches, it really opens up that sound. Next up, we have some more modulation happening on the filter. We've got that random oscillator, remember that random LFO right here, that's set to stereo mode so that we get different results for the left and right channel. I've also assigned that one to the filter. So let me turn that one on. So now we get different low-pass filter cutoff frequency positions for the left and right channel. And you can see it as well. We will now get two filter shapes stacked on top of each other as soon as I play this. Watch. Wait for it. Wait for it. There we go. See? There's two individual shapes. One is for the left channel and the other one is for the right channel. Cool. Now, there is one more modulation happening on here, and that is envelope number 3. I wanted to move this one around a little bit more, and I wanted that to happen on every single note, so I used another envelope with this kind of a shape. So let me zoom out. See, it's that kind of a shape, and that is connected to the filter cutoff as well. So that is just moving this one up and down a little bit more. So that's it for the entire first page of Vital. Now we need to go into one more tab first before we go into the effects, and that's the Advanced tab. On the Advanced tab, there's a couple of things that I did. So you can see right here, this is Oscillator 1, and this is the Unison mode right here. Now because we're using Unison, we can change some of the stuff right here. So the first thing that I changed is the table spread. Now what that is going to do is it corresponds to the wavetable position on this one. So by adding a little bit of spread to the wavetable position, it's going to give the individual voices, which we have 3 on this oscillator, it's going to give those voices a slightly different wavetable position for every voice, making every voice sound slightly different from each other and thus getting a more complex sound. So that's what these modes are really powerful for. Now when I'm doing that to the wavetable position, that's this table spread right here, but I'm also doing it to the spectral spread. This one is going down slightly. So spectral is this first knob, in this case the shepherd tone. So what this is doing... Shut the hell up. I've got some new neighbors and they're drilling outside right now and they're making a shitload of noise, so if you guys hear that, sorry. So, about this spectral spread. So we have the spectral spread. It's brought down just a tiny little bit, and you can see the same thing is happening on the distortion spread, also bringing that one down a little bit. Spectral spread and distortion spread. If I go to the voice tab again here, this is the spectral knob and this is the distortion knob. So, spectral spread, bringing that one down, means that we're going to get a slightly different amount of this shepherd tone on every voice. So every voice is going to have a slightly different setting for this knob. Same thing with the ring modulation. Every voice is going to have a slightly different amount of ring modulation than all the other voices. And that gives us a more complex sound. Now the same thing is happening on the third oscillator. Remember, this one had 16 voices, so I'm doing the same thing. So I'm using the spectral spread and the distortion spread again. This one is brought up a little bit and this one is brought down a little bit. So that again will make the sound more complex, basically. Now finally, that last oscillator is also set to center drop 12. What that is doing is we have 16 voices, which means we have 2 voices in the center and we have 14 voices on the side. Now those 14 voices are going to be playing at the regular pitch. So those are going to be playing at whatever pitch this oscillator is set to, in this case -12. But those center 2 voices are going to be dropped 12 semitones, hence center drop 12, and thus they become an octave lower. So the 2 center voices are actually playing at -24 semitones. The effects tab. Let's get started. So first effect that I added is a chorus. Now the chorus, pretty simple. I'm not sure if I changed much here, to be quite honest. 8 voices, 8/1 frequency. These are the settings for the delay times here. Haven't changed this. Don't think I changed that either. Might have brought the mix down a little bit, but this is what it does. This is without the chorus. And this is with the chorus. So that's very subtle. Next one up is the phaser. Really slow rate on this one, 32/1. So this one is the exact same rate as that slow LFO that we had right here. Again, don't really think I changed much. The offset is down, so that we're not getting any stereo movement of this. Well, actually, it's not down all the way. For some reason, that offset was still up a little bit. Not sure why that is, but hey, it's gonna give us a little bit more width, so that's fine with me. This is just, yeah, just copy these settings if you want. I don't really have much to say about that. Next up, distortion. This is gonna add some grit to the sound. So if I bring the mix up all the way, you're really gonna be able to hear what that does, probably. Now what happens if you have something with different pitches? So this one's playing several notes at a time, right? So we have several different pitches playing at a time. If you distort that, it really starts to break apart. It starts to get really broken after a while, especially if you up the distortion quite a bit. But by adding a little bit to it, you can kind of make these different pitches interact with the distortion. And because they're slightly different pitches, they are all interacting with the distortion in a slightly different way. And that, again, makes the sound more complex. I have brought the mix down a bit though, so that we're not gonna get a lot of this. We're just sort of like mixing it in. Slight little changes like that will make a huge change in the end with the final sound. So now we get this. Cool. Next one up is the compressor. Now, I am using multiband compression on this one, so anybody who's seen the OTT video that I did, this is actually something, this is an example where I think using OTT or using a multiband compressor isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm using it right now in this kind of a way, so I'm using the low band, and we basically have two bands right here. One band here that's basically controlling the lower frequencies, and then we have another band that is basically just bringing out some detail in the higher frequencies. I'm not sure how much this is doing. It's mixed in as well, so it's at about 50%. So this is without. And this is with. So just in general, it's just increasing the loudness a bit. It's making the low end feel a little bit more consistent, and it's bringing out some of the details in the high end. So that's a nice one. I felt by using the low band or the high band, either one of those two, or the single band of course, but that is not a multi-band split at all. But the low and high band modes perform a little bit better because there's only one frequency split happening and not two frequency splits, so there's only one point at which the phase changes. In this case, using multiband compression is kind of, you know, it works and it doesn't really give us much issues. So, next effect, we have an EQ. Now there is some movement happening with this one. EQ band cutoff. Okay, which one is that? Okay, that cut right here is being controlled by the note modulator. So depending on what pitch I'm playing, this cut is actually moving around in the frequency spectrum. So on every note we get a slightly different sort of like EQ cut happening. It's very subtle, it's not needed, but it does add to the complexity of the sound. And this comes back to the whole thing that I said about doing very small little changes like this will add up over time and really sort of like make a sound more interesting. Next up, we have a delay, and let me scroll down a bit. So we have a delay 1/4 frequency set to the dotted timing mode, so tempo dotted, 1/4 dotted timing, mono mode, and a good amount of feedback actually, so we have a good amount of sort of like delays happening after the sound. But because this is a very sort of like sustained kind of sound, and it's a pad kind of sound, we don't really hear the delay that clearly. It sort of like more smears the sound, and it takes, for instance, this note will now bleed into this note, and so forth, and so forth. And that will just, again, make the sound feel more smooth, and just make it, I guess, feel a little bit like wetter in the mix, which is always a good thing. It makes it feel as if it's more in the distant as opposed to really up front in the mix, which is something we want. Same thing for the reverb that is added after that. So the reverb, same thing, mix brought down a little bit. I haven't even changed anything else, so the mix is just at about that position, and that's it. So what those two are going to do is really going to add some space to the pad. See, so when we stop a note, we sort of like get that ringing out as well, and that bleeds into the next notes of the pad. So that's it for the entire patch, I think. Let me check. Yeah, that's it. So that's how I made this pad. Now, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a little bit of a simpler one for me to make. I'm going to be doing more tutorials as well, and if you have any ideas for tutorials, then please feel free to comment below. Now, I am going to thank you guys, first of all, because I have been keeping a close eye on my YouTube analytics page, and I saw that in the last 28 days, more than 60% of the people watching my videos are actually subscribed to this channel, so big up to all of you. I don't have to put this little notice into the video. Hey, did you know that only 10% of my viewers in the last 30 days are actually subscribed to my channel? Screw that shit, I don't have to do that. 60% on this channel. Thanks a lot, boys. That's a really, really, really good number for YouTube's kind of standards, I guess. So that's it for this one. I'm going to be back with a live stream on Friday, so if you want to help support me in doing this, and you want to help me support in doing more tutorials and live streams, then you can support me on Patreon. So go to my Patreon page. On there you can grab this particular preset as well. It's part of the ARTFX Patreon pack for Vital, which is now currently available on my Patreon, plus some extra patches and some extra packs with sounds. I also have a noise pack on there with sounds that you can put into the noise oscillator of Vital or Serum or any other synth. grab those from my Patreon if you want. So that's gonna be it for this video, and I hope to see you again on Friday. Peace!